Welcome back. We are doing something a little different today. For the longest time, I've wanted to, not for the longest time, but for a while, I've been thinking about the next DLC that will come out for Magic 2013, and I've been kind of speculating about what kind of cards or decks are we going to see in in the upcoming expansion. Because I'm assuming that they will be putting out an expansion rather than just a few deck DLCs. They might do that as well, but I think in keeping with the theme of the Ravnica guilds, I think they're going to put out a second expansion just like the first one, which deals with the 5 next expansions, those being the Simic, the Boros, the Gruul, and what else? The Orjov and the Dimir. And one of the things that got me going was that I really liked the Dimir. I also like some of the others as a concept, but haven't really played too much around with those ideas. Like the Orjov sounds really appealing to me. Gruul seems a little it seems a little half-wittish to me, but that might be because I'm not entirely into it, or don't know too much about it. The Boros, we got a really good Boros deck, which I loved in Magic 2012. The March to War deck, which was essentially a Boros deck, also included some Ravnica Boros cards. So yeah, but I'm really into Dimir. I love the idea of brokering with information and dealing or delving with secrets and stuff like that. And there's just so many good cards that you could put in it. So I wanted to show you the the deck that I've put together. First of all, like the main deck that I think would be a somewhat decent underpowered starter or generic starter deck that you start off with, and then the 30 cards that you need to unlock. Okay, so let's take a look at the general deck that you start off with. First of all, let me just say that this deck relies on some different mechanics, which is a combination of something which is seen in other decks in the format. For example, there are mill effects, but unlike, well, most of the mill deck, this deck, which I call the Broker of Secrets, I think. No, the Broker of Whispers. This deck, which I call the Broker of Whispers, relies on being able to use your opponent's spells, or I think also creatures and especially spells from your opponent's hand and from your opponent's graveyard, not as a theme, but as a sub-theme to the mill theme and the discard theme, and those are the two major things about this deck, as well as being able to draw cards. So in these three overarching themes are the like the themes that encompass this deck, which I call the Broker of Whispers. So yeah, first of all, we see the Blizzard Spectre, which is a 4-cost dual-colored creature, 2/3 with flying, and when you deal damage to a player, you choose one. That player returns a permanent he or she controls to his owner's hand, or that player discards a card. So it deals with some bounce, or it has the possibility of bouncing threats, and thereby controlling, or a different way of controlling, discarding, making a player discard his hand. So that's I think that's a very cool, flexible take on the whole Spectre discard deal. Very cool in my opinion. Next up, we have the Dimir Cut Purse, which is there for two reasons. it draws you cards, and it makes your opponent sacrifice creatures. And actually, a third reason as well, because it's called Dimir. It's kind of to string the theme together in a sense. And I think it kind of brings all those different themes together, except for the mill, of course, but mill effect. But yeah, as you'll see, I'll put together some different examples of how you could run this deck, and you could make it mill heavy, you could make it discard heavy, you could do some other things with it. I think this, if Wizards were to release, and they certainly aren't, because this is my way of this is my take on it. But if they were to release this deck in the next DLC, you would have a lot of different options of how to put it together. So yeah, Dimir cut purse. Let's move on. The Dimir doppelganger is really cool. It's a 3-cost 0/2. And for 3 mana, you can remove target creature card in a graveyard from game. That is from your graveyard, but it's also from your opponent's graveyard. That means those creatures that you forced him to discard, or those creatures which you've milled from out of his possession. So. Or out of his library. So that means that you can take advantage of those cards which are in his library. And you're also able to go through the library. Basically, you can use this card to remove creatures from his library as well. So that's really cool if he has if you're playing against Born of Flames, and they have these pesky phoenixes, so phenai. I don't know how to say it in plural. You can basically remove them from game using the Dimir doppelganger. So that's very cool. The Dimir Guild Mage, I thought it's not an amazing card. I don't think that most of these Guild Mages are really all that good, but I think it ties the theme of the deck in, and it being a Dimir card, an official Dimir card, and it being a Guild Mage as well. I think it makes it so that it's that the deck kind of have this feeling to it, because it does have some pretty cool abilities, even though I think they're a little expensive. But it can draw your card, or it can make a player discard a card. So that's pretty decent. The Haven Ghoul Lich is really nice. It ties in with the whole mill and being able to take advantage of when you've milled your opponent, because essentially some decks take advantage of being milled, and also there are also some decks that really don't suffer all that much from being milled. But with the Haven Ghoul Lich, which is a 5-cost 4/4, for one colorless mana, you're able to cast target creature card from a graveyard this turn. When you cast that card this turn, Haven Ghoul Lich gains all activated abilities of that card until end of turn. That is really flexible, and it's also you are also able to draw from your own cards, but you're also able to draw from your opponent's cards, and that makes it very powerful and strong. And I decided to keep it in because I wanted. I've kind of been thinking about what are the tendencies when they put these decks together. What kind of things are they looking for? How many really powerful cards are in the main general default deck, and how many really powerful cards do you have to unlock? So I spent a lot of time looking at the mana curve and so on, and I could spend like weeks and weeks more, because I've only actually used a couple of days looking at this. But it's something which, well, I know that Wizards spend a lot of time, and Stainless as well, trying to get it right, like trying to get that those decks right and balance them and so on. And I haven't had the luxury of being able to test them against the other decks or anything like that. But I think, I don't know, this is just speculation, so bear with me. But I think this is a cool card and not too overpowered to be able to start off with. The Lore Broker is a 2-cost 1/2, and it makes it so that you can tap it, and it draws your card and discards a card. And it also ties in with another theme of this particular deck, which I've tried to put together. And you'll see, no, that's not it. Let me just check. Oh, maybe there's no more in this in the default deck. But as you'll see right here, it's a human rogue. If we go further down, we have a fairy rogue and we have a fairy rogue, and that's it for now. But there are more rogues in to be unlocked, and we'll come to that. But that is a very, very important thing to notice. Anyways, I think this is a nice basic card. It's a 2-drop card which will draw your card, also your opponent, and make them discard. And this will tie in with some of the with some of the synergy with the enchantments that we have going on. Sewer Nemesis is a card which is actually in the Golgari deck, but since it's not a Golgari card, I believe it's from the Commander set, and even if it was, it didn't matter all that much. I just thought that this card fit in with the Dimir deck for 2 reasons. One was that it deals in milling your opponent and takes advantage of milling. Secondly, it also the Golgari and the Dimir are described as sharing the same secret hideouts or sewers and so on, because the Dimir are brokers of secrets, and they're actually like the main nemesis of Azorius, who are like the government, the authority, and so on. And Dimir are disruptive in the sense that they deal with information and kind of like the WikiLeaks of Magic in a sense, but perhaps a little bit more dastardly, and with some assassins tied in with that and so on. But I think Sewer Nemesis is a really nice card, and it kind of fits with the lore that the Dimir would draw upon the Sewer Nemesis as well. Surveilling Sprite is another rogue. It has this ability of, and there's 2 in the default deck. It's a flying 1/1 for 2, and when it's in play, when it's put into a graveyard, you may draw a card. This is just a nice effect, but you'll see the rogue characteristic come into play a little bit later on. Venser Shaper Savant is a 4-cost 2/2. That might be a little expensive, you might think, but it is a flash card, so you can flash it in, and that's part of the reason why it's expensive. Another reason why it's a little expensive is that it has a pretty decent ability. When Venser Shaper Savant comes into play, return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. That is pretty cool in my opinion, because that makes for 2 things. First of all, you can bounce a permanent, not just a creature. You can bounce a permanent to your opponent's hand, kill off those tokens if you want to. But you can also just bounce something that's annoying you right here and now, or bounce that cross-buffing spell so that you have a little bit more control of the attack block situation. The combat situation. But furthermore, it can return target spell. That means a spell that's just about to resolve, a spell that's just being cast, you can bounce that back to your opponent's hand. So he's casting a huge creature, you just bounce it, or make it so that he's not able to cast it before next turn. That might really screw up his plans. So it's a card with a little bit of flexibility. You're not obligated to run it, but it gives you some tricks. Wizened Snitches is a 4-cost 1/3 flyer, and it makes it so that players play with the top card of the libraries revealed. It ties in with the whole Dimir being brokers of knowledge and having insight into your opponent's plans and so on. It's I think it's very interesting, and it makes it so that you are more in control of what you're milling when you're milling. So that's a very nice card in my opinion. Here's the final creature in the default deck, and it's a big one. It's a 6-cost 5/8, which is actually not that expensive in my opinion. It has Island Walk and Swamp Walk, Whenever Rexiel the Risen Deep deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. That's just stealing. That's just stealing your opponent's card. It also ties in with this whole information brokery and this whole rogue theme of the deck. It's a little expensive, but actually not that expensive for how powerful it is, in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to the enchantments. I thought about adding Liliana's Caress. Liliana's Caress. As you'll see, whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. That's a really powerful card. We've seen it in Magic 2012. Yeah, I don't think it's in 2013. Obedient Dead? No, I don't think so. It's really, really good. And I had it in for a while, and then I started thinking about different cards, like, for example, the Migrim, which is essentially the same, except it's a little bit more expensive. It's a 3 cost, which made the Liliana's Caress just that much better. And then I thought about Bloodchief Ascension, which is also in the Rakdos deck, Grinning Malice. But here it makes a little bit more sense, in my opinion. It is a way of stalling a little bit, or you gain life and so on. But it's also a way of making it so that you can you can take advantage of your mill and take advantage of your of your discard effects. So it's really, really good for this deck, in my opinion. Helm of the Ghast Lord. It's an aura, enchant creature. As long as you enchant, as long as the enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1, and has whenever the creature deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. And as long as the enchanted creature is black, it gets +1/+1, and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card. So yeah, it kind of ties in with the whole blue-black theme of get a card, your opponent loses a card, or the information stealing, the hacking, the so on. Very, very cool in my opinion. It's a little expensive, but it will help this deck out a little bit. Memory Erosion is kind of like Jace's Erasure. It's a 1 mana more expensive, 1 blue more expensive. It's a 3 cost rather than a 2 cost. But instead of, and it's not exactly the same as Jace's Erasure, because Jace's Erasure makes it so that when you draw a card, your opponent is milled for 1 card. But with Memory Erosion, it's when an opponent plays a spell, that player puts the top 2 cards of his library into his graveyard. It goes along with I was reading what's his name? I was reading WingSpanTT's Top Tier Tactics article on where he was making guesstimations about what kind of guild abilities or guild mechanics could we be looking forward to in the upcoming Magic the Gathering expansion or set. What's his name? Gatecrash, which deals with exactly what I'm talking about, except that Wizards have chosen not to include any kind of guild mechanic into, as far as I remember, into the previous DLC, and I'm assuming they're not going to do that with the upcoming DLC, which means that you're also not going to see any transmute cards, and certainly not any of the new ones. But I thought about WingSpanTT is a very cool guy, and not to pluck his channel or anything, but it's certainly worth checking out if you don't know about it. But you probably do already, because he's well known in these circles. The thing about he talked about some possible guild mechanics of the Dimir, and one of them was pry, which means that you could pry X, and X was the amount of cards that that you're able to look at the top of your opponent's library, and your opponent could choose for you not to be able to do that, but instead you would be able to draw a card. So you had those options, and it's a way of forcing your opponent to make some choices in that sense. And the second guild mechanic he proposed was blackmail. I don't exactly remember what it was about. I just thought about how cool it is to consider this whole thing about being a hacker and essentially being able to, or being a controller of information and being able to use this information to distortion. What is it called? Extort. Sorry, to perform some extortion against your opponent, and this, I think Memory Roshan and some of the other cards that I've included are a way of saying that if you play that spell, it's going to cost you a few more cards, and make your opponent be a little bit more careful with how haphazardly he throws everything at you, like and cast those spells. Especially also because with you being able to take advantage of the cards in his library, you are essentially also telling him, as soon as he gets to know your deck, that you don't want to put too much in your graveyard. You don't want for me to be able to put too many things in your graveyard, because I can take advantage of them. So that's part of the what I thought about would tie nicely in with the whole blackmail theme. So that's yeah, that's another thing. I included some counter spells because I think there are some really powerful and cool counter spells in Black Blue. First of all, we have Counter Squall, which is a it's a 2-cost instant spell, instant speed spell, which to counter a non-creature spell, and its controller loses 2 life. That's pretty cool as well, I thought, and it punishes your opponent for casting spells basically. Last Gasp is a removal spell that doesn't destroy and it doesn't take care of huge creatures, but it will give you advantages in combat situations, and it will also take care of those creatures who have regenerate, but aren't that big. For example, the ascetic troll, or the troll ascetic, I think it's called. So I thought this was a nice way of doing something different in terms of removal, and also a way of doing something that's a little bit more tricky. So yeah, I like that very much. Memory Plunder is a very cool card in my opinion. It also deals with the whole taking care or taking advantage of your opponent's graveyard situation. You may play target instant or sorcery card in an opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. It's a 4-cost, but you don't have to pay for that spell that you choose. So it could be a cheap spell, it could be an expensive spell. No matter what, you can kind of look through your opponent's graveyard and take advantage of the information you have, because you know what's in the graveyard by just pilfering through it. Very cool. Psychic Spiral is a little bit expensive. It's a and I think I might have to, well, it's a Return to Ravnica card. I overlooked that. That's a shame. Anyways, I think it's also an Azorius card, but that doesn't matter because it's in here, and I'm not gonna change it right now. But it's a very cool card. It's a 5-cost, and it makes it so that you shuffle all your cards from your graveyard into your library. Target player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So that actually it works well with the whole Dimir deal, but we're not gonna see it, I'm pretty sure, because they haven't included any other Return to Ravnica cards in any of the other DLCs. So yeah, that's a shame, and I'm sorry for making this little mishap. Recoil is a very cool card that I really like. It's a 3-cost instant, bounce target permanent to its owner's hand, and then that guy discards a card from his or her hand. Very cool in my opinion. It disrupts his plans, and if his hand is empty, it gives him something to discard, something that he might not want to discard. So that's very cool in my opinion. Shadow of Doubt is a 2-cost instant. It can be really good, and it can be kind of a dead card, except that it also allows you to draw a card. It makes it so that players can't search libraries this turn. That's very good when people are land fetching, or if people are demonic tutoring or whatever they are, if they cast those spells that they're very powerful and go get those. For example, what is it called? Fauna Shaman, I think. One of those cards where you basically discard a creature card and go get the creature card of your choosing, or natural order, or from the same deck, Ancient Wilds, where you sacrifice a creature and go get a creature card, which could be a Palaka worm or something like that, and you just make it so that players can't search the libraries this turn. So he sacrifices a creature or discards a card and nothing else, and you get to draw a card. Very cool. Telling Time is another cool card. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of those cards in your hand, one on top of your library, and one on the bottom of your library. Another cool way of making your way through the deck, and it's cheap. It's an instant spell, and yeah, not much else to say. Undermine is a 3-cost counter spell, which also does 3 points of damage to your opponent. So this is also very powerful. Very strong counter spell. Basically, three points of life is like a seventh of your life total when you start off. So that's nothing to sneeze at, so to speak. Let's jump to the sorceries. Consult the necromages. I included both of them, and you choose one. Either target player draws 2 cards, or target player discards 2 cards. That makes it so that when your opponent's hand is empty, it's not a dead card. It gives you some flexibility. Very cool in my opinion. Glimpse the Unthinkable is basically on the mill side. It's a 2-cost blue-black, and it makes it so that your opponent puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his graveyard. Very cool mill card, and yeah, it works fast. The top 10 cards is like a sixth of your deck. Memory Sluice is a sorcery, 1-cost sorcery. Target player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. And it has Conspire, which means that if you tap down 2 untapped creatures, you get to copy it, basically. Not entirely sure if you can conspire more than once, but at least this makes it so that it's a pretty decent early card game, or in the beginning of the match. But it's better later on, so that's a good card in my opinion. Psychic Theft also deals with the whole thing of stealing or taking advantage of your opponent's deck, and it makes it so that you look at target player's hand, choose an instant or sorcery card from it, and you remove that card from the game. You may play the card as though it was in your hand as long as the card remains removed from the game. At the end of turn, if you haven't played the card, return it to its owner's hand. So it's not that expensive, and that is because you have to actually pay for the spell that you're stealing, in a sense. But also, even though if you even though if you're not going to play this card, you are effectively controlling your opponent's hand a little bit for one turn. So that's a very cool thing to, in my opinion. So I think this is a well. Let's just quickly talk about the lands. We have 11 islands, that's and 9 swamps, and the islands. Well, the reason we have more islands is basically because you have a few blue cards, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I think you have a few more monocolored blue cards in the deck, although most of them are dual colored. So yeah, and you have the obligatory Terramorphic Expanse, or Evolving Wilds, if you will. I think Terramorphic Expanse fits better with this theme. Not that it makes a difference. But yeah, so this is your 60 card deck, basically. So let's take a look at the sideboard. I included something which goes along with the other theme, the rogue theme. Equipped creature gets Sorry, it's called Cloak and Dagger. It's a 2 cost, and equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Shroud. It's a little bit like Whisper Silk Cloak, which is also included in the deck, but only one of them. But this one makes it so that whenever a rogue creature comes into play, you may attach Cloak and Dagger to it. That means you don't have to pay the equip cost of 3 mana. So it gives you some flexibility, and it also works really well for if you want to play this deck in a way that's heavy on the rogue creatures. Whisper Silk Cloak is like I included one of them. It costs 3 to put down on the table. Has an equip cost of 2, and it makes it so that your creature is unblockable and basically has Shroud. We know this card already because it's in the. Let me think. I think it's perhaps in Dream Puppets. Not entirely sure, but it's great because it protects you against your opponent's spells. But it's also good because it makes your creatures unblockable, and that's good for those creatures that want to get in there and make your opponent sack cards, basically, or whatever effect you're working, you're trying to work with. So I put in an extra Blizzard Spectre to be unlocked because I think those are really cool, and they fit very well with the theme of the deck. They're very controlly, and I think 3 of them or 4 would be good for this deck. Actually, I haven't included 4 of any spells, creature spells, or anything else. So 3 is at the most. It's 3 at the most. Then we have a legendary creature which is really awesome. It's Circo the Dimir Lobotomist, which is a bit of a legend within the Dimir circles. He's 4 cost 2/3, and whenever you play a blue spell, remove top card of target library from the game. Whenever you play a black spell, remove the top card of target library from the game. Your opponents can't play non-land cards with the same name as the cards removed from the game with Circo Dimir Lobotomist. Wow, that's a really strong card, and it makes it so that you control which cards your opponents. Essentially, you're in control of which cards your opponents can't and cannot play, at least to the extent that you know what's coming, or you have been through those cards already. And unless they take care of Circu, you can't really do anything about it. I don't think this ability stays on the table when Circu Dimir Lobotomist is gone, but it's a very powerful once as long as he's down on the table. Dark Confident is a cool card which I saw a lot of in the Pro League tour that's just which is just finished. It was in a lot of the Junt decks. If you don't know what that is, it's worth looking up. It's a really interesting deck. Anyways, it's a 2 cost 2/1, and it's basically a kind of expensive and kind of cheap way of howling mining yourself, not your opponent. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal top card of your library and put that card into your hand. So effectively, you draw 2 cards, but you also lose life equal to its converted mana cost. That can be very costly if you don't have, for example, the Blood Chief Ascension going for you, giving you life, or if you're drawing those huge creatures. There's an 8 cost creature in this deck, so that could be a problem. But it's still it speeds up your side and makes it so that that you become very powerful and strong very early on. Okay, I put in an extra Dimir Cut Purse, and that's the second creature that we have 3 of. Dimir Doppelganger, put in an extra one of those. Dimir Guild Mage, the same. Dralnu the Lich Lord is such a beast. It's a legendary creature, zombie lord. It's a 5 cost 3/3, and it makes it so that well, if damage would be dealt to Dralnu, sacrifice that many permanents instead. So it's difficult to get rid of, but it will make you sack permanents. However, if you keep him or her out of harm's way, you could use it to tap, and you are able to give flashback to a single instant or sorcery card in your graveyard every turn. So that's very strong, and it makes it so that you can use your spells one more time, basically. Evil Twin is a very cool card. It's a little like the Doppelganger that copies albeit a card or a creature in a graveyard, but Evil Twin makes it so that you copy a creature on the battlefield, and you give it the following ability: that for 1 blue and 1 black and tap, you destroy target creature with the same name and as this creature. That's really cool because then you can clone your opponent's creatures and kill them off with the shapeshifter. It's a 4 cost, which is also fairly cheap. So very good card in my opinion. It's much better than the regular clones because you actually get rid of the guys that you're cloning. I included 2 of these guys, which I thought was an awesome card and fit with the theme of the deck. It's a 5-cost Spirit Avatar 4/4, and it is unblockable. Whenever Gastlog Fugu deals combat damage to a player, that player reveals his or her hand, reveals it, choose a card from it, and that player removes that card from the game. That is also pretty sick in my opinion. No flashback, no recall from the grave or reanimate or whatever. It's like just get it out of here. We don't care about your stuff anymore. Lurking Informant is another really cool card in my opinion. It's a 2-cost, 1/2, and for 2 mana and tapping it, you'll be able to look at the top card of your player's library, and you may put that card into the player's graveyard. And in conjunction with the Wizened Snitches, you pretty much know what you have going for you, so you know when to tap it down, and you can just remove those cards that you don't want your opponent to have. Very cool combo. Mind Leech Mass or Mindless Mess. Mind Leech Mass is a very expensive card. It's an 8-cost, and I included it mainly because in all the other decks you have options of running expensive cards, but this card is really good in my opinion as well. So I thought I would include it just to give it like the sense of authenticity that you have like a mana curve, but it's not it doesn't ebb out until all the way to the end of very expensive cards as well. It has trample. It's a 6/6, 8-cost. Whenever Mind Leech Mass deals combat damage to a player, you may look at the player's hand, and if you do, you may play a non-land card in it without paying that card's mana cost. That is insanely powerful. So once you get that down, put a Whisper Silk Cloak on it and steal your opponent's shit. So yeah, very powerful card. Nemesis of Reason. That's in my opinion a very cheap card. It looks expensive. It's a 3/7 and it's a 5-cost. Whenever Nemesis of Reason attacks, not deals damage to a defending player, but attacks, defending player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. You can't do that for too many turns without your opponent being entirely without creatures or cards in his library. So that is very powerful. But now we come to something that deals with the rogue mechanic, and let's see, this is a rogue as well. Let's see if we have any more in there. No, we might not have. No. Una's Blackguard, which is the god of this beast. Let's first take a look at the Una's Blackguard, because this is actually essentially the better card of the 2, because it's very cheap. It's a 2-cost, 1/1 with flying, and each other rogue creature you control comes into play with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card. So that's very cool in my opinion, because it makes it so that you suddenly have many options of how to attack your opponent and peel those cards out of his hand. So very cool. There's 2 of them that you might want to run. Una, Queen of the Fae, is itself a very cool card, especially in conjunction with the Blackguard. It's a 6-cost, so it's a little expensive, but it's also a 5/5 flyer, and it has it has the following ability: spend 1 blue or 1 black, and X mana and choose a color. Target opponent removes the top X cards of his or her library from the game. For each card of the chosen color removed this way, put a 1/1 blue and black fairy rogue creature token with flying onto play. That's very cool in conjunction with the blackguard, in my opinion. So yeah, a nice way of taking advantage of the rogue mechanic as well. Sewer Nemesis, I put an extra one of these, and I put in Sadek, Lord of the Secrets, which is another legendary and another very famous creature from the Dimir guild. It's a 5/5 flyer for 7, and it makes it so that, or it has the following ability. If Sadek, Lord of Secrets, would deal combat damage to a player, instead put that many +1/+1 counters on Sadek, and that player puts that many cards from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So first turn, smack 5 cards. Second turn, smack 10 cards. Third turn, smack 20 cards in your library. Like, this is insane. You want to stop this right away. Very cool card. Put in an extra Blood Chief Ascension, an extra Helm of the Ghast Lord, an extra Memory Erosion, and this beast, which also deals with the whole blackmail mechanic that I'm trying to, or blackmail theme that I'm trying to install in this deck. Painful Quandary. 5 cost enchantment, and whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player loses 5 life unless he or she discards a card. It makes it so that your opponent doesn't do things haphazardly anymore. Very cool card. Instant spells, I included the Counterbore, which we saw in Magic 2012. I think maybe also in Duels of the Planeswalker, the first iteration. It's a 5-cost counterspell. It's a little expensive, and I wanted to keep the counterspells a little expensive in this deck because I wanted them to have tricks and abilities or extra effects, and I also wanted it to be something that like this deck would be way overpowered if you could counter spells with 1 cost or 2 cost counter spells, and at the same time just peel away at your opponent's hand and deck as well. So I wanted to keep the counter spells a little bit more expensive, but also with some tricks to them. And this one makes it so that you search your control, you counter target spell, search its controller's graveyard, hand, and library for all cards with the same name as that spell and remove them from the game. Then that player shuffles his or her library. That's very powerful in my opinion. Gives you more control of which cards that your opponent is actually allowed to play, and it is, in effect, a very good way of getting rid of those demigods of revenge from the Grinning Malice deck. Dismal Failure is another cool card, and if I had more room in this build or in this deck, I would run more of them. It makes it so that when you counter target spell, its controller discards a card as well. It's a nice 2-for-1. It costs 4. It's a little expensive, but the 2-for-1 is just fucking amazing. It makes it so that the card that he thought he was about to cast, he doesn't get that. Okay. And and he has to discard another card in hand. He might be down to 2 cards at this point, so he casts one of them and loses the other. So basically, it's a very, very powerful card in my opinion. Extirpate, I think it's called. It's a 1-cost instant, and I'm not sure if they can make the split-second mechanic work with in Magic 2013, but it's really, really cool. As long as this spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So basically, it gives you some control of what's occurring right now. You can stop your opponents from casting more spells at this moment right now, and he has to wait until the stack has resolved, basically. But it also does the following thing, which is its main effect. Choose target card in a graveyard other than a basic land card. Search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for all cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library. Very, very powerful. It's kind of like Counterbore in the sense that it gives you the power to control what's in your opponent's library. Memory Planter, we put another one of those into the deck or into the unlocks, and I think it's just an amazing card. Very, very good. Another Recoil, another Shadow of Doubt, and another Telling Time. Of the sorcery spells, Glimpse the Unthinkable, put another one of those in there. Haunting Echoes, which is a 5-cost sorcery. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard other than basic land cards. For each card exiled in this way, search that player's library for all cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then that player shuffles his or her library. Another card that waves goodbye to Demigod of Revenge and Phoenixes and so on. Very, very powerful card. And it's, of course, an unlockable. Mind Funeral is also very cool. Very powerful as well. It's a 3-cost sorcery, and target opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library. Until 4 land cards are revealed, that player puts all cards revealed this way into his or her graveyard. I think that's really powerful as well. It's not entirely overpowered, but it is. It was either this or Traumatize, and I think Mind Funeral is both cheaper, but it has the possibility of being more effective later on in the game. It could be a little bit ineffective in the beginning of the game. Especially considering what potential it has, but it could be very, very good. And seeing that it's a blue-black card, I thought it fit the theme of the deck much better. Psychic Theft, already talked about it, put another one of those in there. Temporal Extortion is a very cool alternative to Time Warp. It's expensive in the sense that it costs 4 black. So you need to have 4 black. You can't have a few blue and so on. You need 4 black to cast this spell. When you play Temporal Extortion, any player may pay half of his or her life rounded up. If a player does, counter Temporal Extortion. If they don't, take an extra turn after this one. I originally had 2 of them in there, but because of the mana cost, I thought it's a little bit it might not work too well to have 2 of them in there, but it is a very powerful card when it's in there, and it's if you do have the mana, it's kind of cheaper than Time Warp, but kind of not, because you're also going to have some islands down there. So I thought it was a nice spin on the Time Warp deal, because it also it takes the whole Time Warp blue spells and effects and dealing with temporal magic into account, but it also deals with some black themes, like draining your opponent's life and the blackmail deal. So I thought that was a very cool card. Wistful Thinking is a card that I wish I could add 4 of, because it's just so good. Target player draws 2 cards and discards 4 cards. You can use it on yourself if you want, but this is obviously a card that you want to send directly into your opponent's general direction while you have the Blood Chief's Ascendance down. It's a very, very powerful, very strong card. So yeah, this is basically the default deck and the sideboard, or the unlockable, I should say. I used the sideboard for the unlockables. And if you guys have any interest, I could put some decks together out of this. If not, then you can just take a look at this video, and I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, basically this is my way of imagining how you could work with the Dimir theme without, well, obviously, except for that one I forget which one it was, but I added a might be a sorcery, might be one of these beasts here. Yeah, the Psychic Spiral, which is obviously a Return to Ravnica card. Aside from that, I think this could be a plausible deck. They probably won't add the Rogue theme, but certainly the Mill theme and the Discard theme, and yeah, somewhere in between. They might also add the Liliana's Caress instead of the Blood Chief Ascension. Another reason for me adding the Blood Chief Ascension is that they tend to recycle the cards that's already in the format, so I thought it was plausible and a very viable option, very good option. So yeah, I hope you liked it. Let me just, before I go, let me just show you something. Transmute. This is the original guild mechanic. Transmute, discard this card, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost as this card, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. This was the original guild mechanic, which I thought was okay, but I think the fact that you have to reveal that card makes it so that, well, it's probably to avoid cheating, but aside from that, I think it's a terrible deal because you don't get to keep those spells that you're searching for secret. Um, there are a bunch of them, by the way, like these transmute cards. The Dimir infiltrator, for example. But anyways, yeah, I hope you liked it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, and I'll try to put out more of these guild decks or these guild speculation decks concerning the upcoming DLC or the second DLC expansion. Tell me what you think, and leave a like if you liked it. If not, then don't. And I'll see you in the next video. Laters!